to have those reserves building back up will lead to better things like really easy menopause or exquisite sleep, or what I like to call, like this divine open channel for you channeling your higher work through. The women that are like us, like we want to work in those higher levels of consciousness. This is how more creative genius flows through us. And it also feels really, really good. This is a high joy in our work. For us to sustain that and keep doing that, we have to know a little more about how the feminine body will handle all of that higher consciousness, kind of be prepared for more of it.
Learn the ways of the goddess and accomplish much more with so much less effort. Welcome to Your Goddess Awakened with Halle Eavelyn, a show dedicated to helping you embrace your divine feminine and nurture your inner goddess for a radiant life. We invite you to join us every week to receive goddess wisdom that will help you through your current obstacles and lifelong traumas. Awaken the goddess within you and transform your business and your life, only here on Your Goddess Awakened.
Hello and welcome to Your Goddess Awakened. I am here with my beautiful guest, Dr. Stephania Sciamano. Did I do okay there? Is that the correct way to pronounce it?
That's right.
Dr. Stephania, why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your background, and then we will dive right in the sacred divine feminine.
Yes. So I was a private practice naturopathic medical doctor for 9 years. And during that time, I trained as a shaman. And then I let all of that go. And I followed my heart to a completely different life and a completely different calling that blends a little of my background, but it opened up a great big world for me.
Yes, and I have had the privilege to work with Dr. Stephania before, and she does some pretty mind-blowing experiences. That is what I will have to say about that. So, thank you. So we're here to talk today about, I guess, the idea that the sacred divine feminine is kind of this lofty concept. Right? It's ancient and it has to do with the goddess and, how to show up for us in our everyday lives. And I just wanted to kind of have a dialogue with you about that. And so first I'd love to hear like what that means to you and how you feel that affects your life or the lives of your clients.
To me, the divine feminine is what we embody on this earth when we are born as feminine and identify as feminine. So to me, that is becoming more and more like the Great Mother in all of the facets of woman.
And so how do you define the Great Mother?
I think that the concept of God is love consciousness, and that can be further divided. Divided isn't quite the word, but described.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Described as having feminine aspects and masculine aspects, like the law of gender in the 7 Hermetic laws. I believe that God actually can give us communication and support in masculine and feminine ways. So to me, the Great Mother is the feminine aspect of God.
Okay, so let's back up for a second and just talk a little bit more about the 7 Hermetic laws. You don't have to like name them all by rote.
Oh, good. I'm like, what are the 7 again? So one of them is the law of gender, and to me, that is everything has, a receiving end and a penetrating end, kind of like when we look at maybe an electrical outlet would be the easiest analogy.
Yeah.
So
I don't know if anybody knows this, or anybody doesn't know this, but in an electrical outlet, I always found this fascinating. The male end is the prongs, and the female end is the socket. And when I first heard that, I think I was about 12 years old. And I think, my dad was talking to me about the male end and the female end of a tool, for example. Wait a minute. Was that oh, like it was like this revelation for me that things would have a male end and a female end, not in the sense of like sex, rather in the sense of like how they look to people or how they show up. However, the idea of, as you said, the penetrating part and the receiving part, those are the masculine and the feminine. And I'm going to say before we go on anymore, I know you know this, but just for anybody that's listening, this is, you said earlier, like, or how you identify yourself as female. And, this, we're not talking about people's right to identify themselves. I personally believe, I know you do too, that people have the right to identify themselves any way they gosh darn well please.
Yes.
So this is more about, well, talk more about this, because I know this is kind of at the heart of your work, of the idea of the masculine and the feminine both being inside of us.
I believe that the way that we interact with the divine comes from within, and therefore we have both within. So, sometimes my work, people have maybe said I'm a little heteronormative because I talk about women being feminine and I talk about men being masculine. And some of that is just to create context, but I really believe that inside we have a God self, and then that God self has times when we are more masculine, when we are in action and direction and decision making. And other times we are more feminine when we are in receiving and softness and nurturing. And that we need both to succeed on our mission and our movement as consciousness raising women.
Yeah. Yeah. And, for me, I always have found that I have spent more time in the masculine side of myself than I have in the feminine, because as a 30-year entrepreneur, I've been running businesses myself since I was in my early 20s. And when I was, running a business, I was one of 5 women executives in industry. So I know what it's like to feel like you have to show up as that masculine doing all the time, or nobody will take you seriously. Nothing will get done. They're already looking at you and like you have breasts, so there's something wrong with you. And a lot has changed since then. I've been very grateful gratified to see that a lot has changed since then.
Yeah, I think that each of us that has built a very successful business and are high achievers by nature, kind of alphas, or just highly ambitious, we are taught to do it as if we have a man's body, as if we have a man's biology and can withstand different levels of prolonged stamina. A woman's body isn't meant to do that all the time.
Talk more about that, because that's actually something I've never heard before. So I would say my body can do anything that a man's body can do.
So yes, it absolutely can. And that's where I think women kind of have the but of but I can do this. Yeah, but I've done that.
Right.
And yes, this is all true. However, a woman's biology needs to come to more of out of fight or flight, which is what we call the sympathetic, and into the parasympathetic, which is like rest, digest. There's a softness, there's an openness. And that's required for a woman's hormones to balance right. So some of the time a woman might sort of mishear me and think that I'm saying just slow down or you can't do that. And that isn't what I mean at all. There's a different level of balance in how the body needs to be treated, and the awareness of the feminine body, especially as we get into our 40s. That's when our reserves have already been kind of used in our 20s and 30s and how we pushed ourselves. And, if we want to talk practical terms in the body, to have those reserves building back up will lead to better things like really easy menopause or exquisite sleep, or what I like to call, this divine open channel for you channeling your higher work through. The women that are like us, we want to work in those higher levels of consciousness. This is how more creative genius flows through us. And it also feels really, really good. This is a high joy in our work. For us to sustain that and keep doing that, we have to know a little more about how the feminine body will handle all of that higher consciousness. kind of be prepared for more of it. So this is where my work really shines.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I know when we did a session together a few weeks ago, you talked to me about like the adrenal glands getting exhausted. And I would love if you could just talk a little bit more about that, because I feel like all of this stuff is totally interconnected. And I think, for me anyway, my conversations with you always help put pieces together, because I'm like, oh, I knew that and I knew that, but you didn't understand they actually had anything to do with each other. And meanwhile, you're totally interconnecting them as if it's like clasping hands, which is what I'm doing right now. So anyway, So I would love for you to talk more about that.
So the adrenal glands, we make our sex hormones there too. People think of it as cortisol and adrenaline, but it also makes your sex hormones in ways that we manage blood sugar and blood pressure. So it's not just get up and go as is normally thought. When we get a little older, we need progesterone, especially for things like relaxing. It's a very relaxing hormone to the body and to the mind. And we also need it to balance out estrogen so that we don't get what's called estrogen dominance. And estrogen dominance is a funny thing. It kind of sneaks up on a lady. And then she's like, hey, why can't I get this weight off? I'm doing all the right things. Or why am I waking up in the middle of the night with a shot? And why am I up? And why can't I go back to sleep? So it'll start to show in the body. But interestingly enough, and what often gets a woman's attention more than that, is it starts to show up in her money. So she will have a cap on her income. And that's when a lady goes, oh, really? I'll deal with the insomnia, but the money, oh, really?
This is not okay. We got to fix this now. Do people ever come to you? I'm sorry. Say what you were going to say again.
You just said there's no herb for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, there's no sacred money herb. That's so disappointing.
If I find one, I'll let you know.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So do women ever show up saying to you, do they make that connection? Do they ever come to you saying, I have a cap on my money? Or is that
That's
something
usually why they come first? It's like, I have observed that most women can sort of manage or deal with the body as an afterthought, or I'll get to you later, or hey, this is normal for my age.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
But if she's doing all the things, like her strategy's right, her offer, her messaging, she likes her clients, and the money has a cap, she's like, WTF, what is happening here?
Yeah. Yeah. So I have a lot of clients as well who come to me saying, have a money cap. However, I guess I should have asked this a little bit differently. Do women show up saying, I have a money cap, and knowing that it's from my hormones? That's the thing that's kind of making me surprised here.
She doesn't usually use the word hormones. It's more of and I feel like my body's holding me back.
Oh,
or
yeah.
When I push a little harder to get the money a little higher, my body feels like it's kind of crashing, like it doesn't really want to go along with it. Mm-hmm. Or the way I used to do business that got me here, my body's saying no.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally understand. Yes. And especially that pushing thing. I mean, raise your hand if you worked 100 hours a week in your 20s. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. And I'm sure we're raising our hands, and I'm sure anybody listening right now is like, oh yeah. So And I was saying earlier today on a coaching call that we have this tendency when we are phase and when we're working, we think that's the only thing that we can possibly do. That's the way of the world. And then by the time I was in my 40s, I was like, yeah, there has to be some better way. And that was really where I started seeking those answers. It's one thing to say idea that inherently with a woman and therefore need to do less. That's something that I think gives us that's a big shift for a lot of women.
Yeah, and I think a lot of women too have found that her wants and desires just change. What she wanted in her 20s and 30s, and you get to your 40s and you're like, I don't know if that doesn't sound that hot anymore.
Right.
I want something else.
Yeah. And the balance starts to become more important. idea, a lot of times by that age, women have children, they have spouses, they have family members. I know women who have said, well, I'll like work until I'm 40 and then I'll worry about love. But the minute that they meet somebody and they fall in love, suddenly their energy starts to go, oh, I'm looking for something different. I want my life to be different. And then start to seek more of that balance. So some of it I feel is inherent. Let's talk about the idea of how working with our feminine nature, instead of, I think, certainly for me, when I was in my 30s, I would have said, oh no, the more feminine I am, the more wishy-washy I'm going to be, or the more like weak I will be perceived as. Oh, that was in my 30s. I was like, I divorced a husband being weak, by the way. Like that was I don't know that he was, but that's how I perceived of him, right? So isn't that interesting? Like, what do you feel about that?
I think that femininity has definitely gotten a bad rap of neediness and, all up in her emotions, unable to get things done. So therefore, masculine energetics of like decision and like, here's the line and get this shit done. Like this has been pedestalized so beautifully to the point where, no one really knew there was another way. And there was another question that you asked in there that I kind of want you to repeat for me, because what was that?
I'll see if I can remember. There were lots of layers. I apologize. I guess I just want to know how you feel that the feminine can be used as a tool for assisting and us, as opposed to something you have to resist.
Thank you. That helps. Yes. So the feminine goes first in the creation process. The feminine has to go first in the frequency of what she desires. This is always first. And within herself, the masculine responds with the how. What we often do is we go right to the how of the vision, and the frequency of desire is not embodied in a woman. And when I say the frequency of desire, I mean even an erotic charge to what she really, really wants. So many women are operating in the more masculine or yang, which is dry and fire. We women know dryness is not our friend. And yes, I mean that in all the ways.
Yes.
Yes.
Physically and emotionally and mentally, and it's got it.
Mm-hmm. So the feminine has to go first in her frequency of her desire, and then the masculine responds with the how. We often want to jump right to the how without a clear, yummy feeling in the body desire. Sometimes the desires come from what you used to want, what you think you should want, what you think other people want. When we get a little further along in our evolution, that does not work anymore. That starts to feel like hustle, exhaustion, taking responsibility for other people's results and emotions, when really like our desire is off. So admitting what you really want is a thing that we have to kind of come back to. And the funny thing is, what we really, really want is usually hidden under layers of societal conditioning, or at least how we thought it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
So this can be a process for women sometimes, but other times it's like, hang on, I know what I want. I've been hiding this from myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that's absolutely spot on. Certainly if I had a nickel for every time a came to me and said, but how? And if I had another nickel for every time a woman came to me and like, I want this, but it turned out she actually wanted something completely different, but it was under those societal layers, I'd have lots and lots of nickels. Okay, so what are some basic tools that you would suggest? Maybe just a couple of tools that you would suggest for women, and then I'll see if I have anything to add on to that, for women to be more in alignment with that sacred divine feminine in a real day-to-day sense.
One thing that is a little shocking to a lot of women is to hear that her power, her feminine power, is in her no. So no, like N-O.
Yeah.
because there's other kinds of no. But what happens is we feel bad when we say no. We're afraid of the other person's reaction or emotion, or that maybe we won't get what we want, or how we'll be seen. But when we learn to find turn on in rejection, turn on in saying no, and I like to help women kind of embody a new identity that has diva, so that you're like, no, darling, that will not do. Like there's no emotion there, and there's a little bit of turn on. When we find in our environment, like even in your office, kind of look around the room and find 3 things that do turn you on. Okay. And then you kind of find 3 things that you're like, ooh, that one doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
We remove the things that are not of turn on, and then we focus on the ones, or add more that is. Imagine your environment as a woman fully filled with only things that you're like, oh yeah. Like, what do you think that would do to the frequency of the woman as a whole?
Yeah. Yeah.
All of her facets.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, when you and I did our session together, you talked to me about tolerating and not tolerating things. This is exactly what you're speaking about right now. And I have found that to be so helpful. I mean, those of you that are listening to this, as opposed to watching it on YouTube, you can't see that I'm sitting in this like really beautiful wingback leather chair, and that this beautiful wingback leather chair is just this sort of rusty orange color. I love the color of this chair. And a few days ago and said to me, oh, this chair looks so very deliberate. And I was like, heck yes, it's deliberate, because it is one of those things that you're talking about. Like, it turns me on. I mean, I don't think of it in those terms. I would just say like, it's really yummy to look at, or it makes me happy, brings me joy. A lot of my work revolves around bringing women more joy in their lives. You and I, Stephania, are talking about the same thing right now. That turn on concept is, another word for that is, to me anyway, is joy. And so when I look at this chair and I'm like, yummy, I can't wait to sit in that again, there's an energetic there that really changes things. That's why I picked it as like, this is going to be like my little studio space every single week. And so that's important to me, to have it be something that's really yummy and beautiful. So am I on the right track?
You are. And let's touch on toleration though, because this is a really important piece of it, that so many women don't realize how much they're tolerating. Tolerating is also pedestalized, as if that is compassion and gratitude and wonderful things. But if what we are tolerating in our field will drain energy. And it's not something that can usually be cleared out in a single day, because sometimes you have to tolerate things that you really don't like my child that interrupts me over and over and over in my workday. But it's up to me to change it. It's up to me to set the boundary of like, hey, this is when you can come in, this is when you cannot. We tolerate things all over the place and don't realize it until we kind of do an inventory. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh, I actually don't like that thing in my kitchen. Oh, I don't want that food in my fridge. Oh, this is, that person that I hired isn't actually working out, but I'm trying to be nice. It's like,
been there, done that, bought the t-shirt.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we can clear the vessel of the body with clearing the environment. Or it's not a one-to-one, but it can begin the process. Because a body that is in a high tolerant field will create armor energetically. We will kind of have this sensation. And what I'm showing for those that don't have the video is there's almost like a bracing. Like we micro brace over and over and over all day. And that becomes its own money block.
Mm-hmm. And its own fight or flight, adrenaline fatigue, and adrenal fatigue, I should say. And it also becomes the way that we women find ourselves exhausted all the time. There are so many autoimmune diseases that, and if you're if you're in a situation where you have what's been diagnosed as an autoimmune, this is something that you know for yourself inside. So I'm not, you're the medical doctor. However, I feel like there's so much association with that, with like, oh, there's nothing actually wrong with you. And there, doctors tell the story of like, women are always talking about like having been to 6 doctors because the doctor's story is, this isn't really a problem. This is all in your head. And while I don't believe that that's true at all, I do believe that a lot of the causes are that, as you call it, the toleration of your life over time. And so getting that clarity, I mean, I personally, and I'm sure you have as well, I've seen medical miracles happen in the work that I do with people because they're off that switch and they're not doing this anymore. And then their bodies, which are the outward expression of what's going on inside, are able to heal, sometimes like literally overnight. Like that's the miracle part of the medical experience. Have you had anything like that happen that you've seen?
Absolutely. And in all kinds of ways, like you said, it's like, it could be pain, it could be, a digestive thing, like that changes when the person is no longer sort of holding a million things at once. Like how many women out there feel like they're holding a million things at once?
All of us, I think.
Yeah. But when you're in more of the field of yes and turn on, having cleared out the tolerance and the no, it doesn't feel like you're holding anything. You become more of this. This is the divine feminine, the empty chalice into which the divine can deposit all of the things you desire. But there has to be an emptiness first. Mm-hmm. Like the black formless void that is the beginning of creation in all sacred texts. It's the same idea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the idea that you're willing to receive, and that as you receive, like a lot of women I think are like, oh God, I just can't take one more thing. And so I don't want you to feel like this is what we're talking about is, as you hear this, is that kind of receiving. Rather, it's receiving from a place of power, from a place of, that empty, because you've emptied out all the stuff that, as they say in woo-woo terms, no longer serves you. Like all the things that are, that you've been maybe hanging on to because it was the way that you always did it, or the way that you felt like it needed to be done, or the way that society told you that it needed to be done, but it isn't in alignment with you. Do you agree with that, Stephania?
Absolutely. I want to touch on something that makes me laugh in what you said there is, like you said, the woo-woo term.
Oh yeah.
What no longer serves. I think that women would find more power in saying, I just don't want it.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't like it. And I find that there's more power in that edge versus no longer serves. Who decides if it's serving or not? Mm-hmm. There's a little more like, I get to say, I command my own field and I decide what's in it. Like, oh, that's your feminine power, honey.
Yeah. Yeah. Love it. Yeah. I have an exercise that I do with people where I invite them to go live planet you. So like you would live on planet Stephania and I live on planet Halle, and we get to make the rules. So exactly the kind of stuff that you're talking about. And it is truly empowering for women to shift into that space. And it's an energetic first, because it's not about like, oh, everything is going to go perfectly on your planet right away. Rather, you're making the decision to go and live there. So the decision that you've been making up until now, which is to like let everybody else rule the planet that you live on. Mm-hmm. So, any last words for anybody?
I think that women have a lot more power than they have admitted. And that when they can come into the delight in becoming more and more emptied out, so that empty golden chalice, that like formless void, emptying what is full, like always emptying, that she will be utterly delighted and surprised at what the divine can now have room to deliver to her and for her.
Beautifully stated. That is fantastic. I thank you so much for being here with me and for sharing the space and for talking to me about and to everyone about my favorite topic. I think your work is wonderful, and I'm so grateful that you came in to share this space today. Thank you.
Thank you too, Halle. Thanks so much.
I invite everyone to tune in for our next episode. We will be talking more about the sacred divine feminine. We will be talking more about how to bring this into your everyday life. And we will be talking about how to show up in a way and in many ways that can allow you to really have your own power without feeling like you're taking anything away from everyone else. Blessings.
You have just listened to another enlightening and transforming episode of Your Goddess Awakened with Halle Eavelyn. We hope you enjoyed your time with us and join us again next time so you can continue your journey towards a full transformation. For additional resources and to learn more about working with Halle Eavelyn, visit halleeavelyn.com. Receive more, do less, and love your life. Only here on Your Goddess Awakened.